Madison, we're back. We got lots to talk about today, but first, let's just get right to our interview with my longtime buddy, Jasher Austin, a voiceover actor. It was a good conversation about the nature of voice acting and what it looks like to even do the work and how to develop voices.
Stick around after as we discuss some of the movies we've been watching lately.
We already know each other. I've just introduced you to Madison. And for all the people listening, let's talk a little bit about you and what you do creatively.
Yeah, I would definitely say part-time voice actor. I don't have the full-time to commit to like full-time. Part-time stay-at-home dad. Part-time co-owner of a Dungeons and Dragons Twitch podcast streaming thing. It's still weird that we're technically a business and we're technically making money. Because like from our end, it's just like we're just playing, but people happen to pay us to do it. And then voiceover, and once the kid goes to bed, it's voiceover, and then a lot of editing during the day when she's awake.
Can you just imagine telling your dad or someone from your dad's generation that you get paid to play Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah. Yeah, it's bizarre.
Then again, we're not getting paid here, but we're putting out a broadcast of Friends over the phone. So, we're all doing funny things these days. Now, where are you based right now? Are you still in?
Yeah, so I'm still in Georgia. We're looking to move, but who knows what that is, what that means. But yeah, I'm in the Athens area.
Now, remind me where you grew up, though.
All over. So my dad was institute coordinator in the church. My dad was also considered a fixer. So we got moved far more frequently than other people in his position, where he would have to come in and fix what was being taught and how it was being organized and just get it back to basics. So I was born in Utah. I don't have any memories of it, like maybe snippets. But he started in seminary and then moved to coordinating. We moved to Manhattan. I lived there through kindergarten, moved to Virginia, to Kentucky. Then I graduated and went to live in Florida for like 9 months to work to save up for my mission. Went on my mission for 2 years. They had moved to Boston while I was gone. So moved to Boston, was there back and forth between college and Boston, dropped out of college. Couldn't figure out what I wanted to do with a major, and everything kept like going towards art. And I'm like, there's no point getting a degree in this. So dropped out. And then I started working just odd jobs, building like my resume with acting. I auditioned a ton in Atlanta as it was building up the film industry down here. A lot of callbacks, no work. But then 2020 happened, and I was like, I'm going to use the stimulus check and I'm going to start voice acting. So I bought all the equipment, and that's what I do now.
Thank
Good
you,
for
stimulus
stimulating
check.
the economy.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I thought you were from Kentucky, but now that I have the full story, I'm like, I think you told me that before. Yeah. Moving around. Kentucky the longest, though, right?
Yeah. Same as Virginia, but yeah.
So never living in a company town for too long.
No.
I mean, Manhattan for a hot minute, but that's not even a company town.
No.
Did you always know you wanted to do something creative?
Yeah.
I know you talked about changing majors, but you knew that was where your heart was.
Yeah. Like I started as a music major.
Okay.
I didn't like this. Like I was going for singing. So like they're like, here's the science of your vocal cords. And I'm just like, I don't care. This is not what I'm here for. And so then I was like, maybe I'll switch to an art, or maybe I'll switch to theater. Neither of those felt right. So I was like, okay, I'll just be a IT major, and then I'll have this degree to fall back on. And I was just like, this is not for me. Just because like it was more programming based, which is my brain can't do programming. I can do IT. That's what I've done most when I was doing other stuff, but the actual sitting down and programming something is just not something my brain does. So I was like, no, I don't need a degree. But yeah, both my parents are have doctorates in theater and film. So my mom is a collegiate professor of theater and founded a university theater program at Southern Virginia University, the non-official LDS school. My mom founded the theater program there. And so I've been acting since I was like 6.
What's the pull towards voice acting? Because it shares some DNA with acting, but it's also pretty different. So like, what's the draw there?
So I think the draw for me was I don't have to like go to location as much. Like when they started moving towards home based, like you can have your own booth, you can work from home. That was the biggest draw for me. And I know that for some actors, like the hard thing, especially like if you look at like more of like traditional actors they've been hiring a lot lately, which is a whole different issue, but they always put them in the same room. They're always with the other actors acting off each other because it's completely different to be alone in a booth and you have the director feeding you the other lines where they're playing off each other. It's a very different mentality of sitting there and acting with no one. But I've always had a hyper active imagination, so I don't really have that same issue as some other actors. But I think that at least with voice acting, the big thing that they always tell you is you have to have some sort of basis in acting. It's not just having a good voice. You got to actually know what you're doing acting wise.
I think one of my favorite behind the scenes things to watch is the voice acting and seeing how much physical acting is going on in the booth and moving around, using hands, really like playing it out. Of course, the most famous one I think I've seen in the last few years is Bradley Cooper acting for Rocket. And he's all over that booth. He's just exploring the space, freaking out.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just look like I think I imagine 1930s radio programs. Hold the headphone there and be like, Kellogg's, because you shouldn't. I won't use that joke. Because we don't want you to have too many kids. Kellogg's, whatever it be. Anyway, so your acting background played into your voice acting.
Yeah.
You said you're doing it part-time right now, so not full-time. Where does someone even go to start voice acting? Is there an Upwork or a Fiverr, a freelance place, or where do you go for most of it?
Ideally, I know a lot of people do the Fiverr route. You're really underselling yourself if you're going that way. There are websites you can go to. I personally use Voice123. You can do it for free, but there are like different levels of paid tiers. So basically, as a company is looking for a voice actor, they can say, I don't want to hire anyone under this pay tier. And then the auditions get sent out. And they have 2 ways of doing it. Either they personally reach out to you, or they let the Voice123 algorithm just say, here's my parameters, and then they send it to everyone within those parameters on a randomized basis. And so I've done that for a while. I've gotten some commercial work doing that. It's try to get a professional demo if you can. Hire a studio space and just work around. The biggest thing is find a microphone that works for you, because everyone's like, just buy this microphone, it's never that. It's like, know your voice. And the thing that I would recommend to anyone starting voice acting is rent a studio space, find somebody who's got just a lot of microphones for a bunch of different people and say, hey, can you work with me to find out what would be best for me and where my audio range is? And a sound engineer they're really great at being able to like do that with you in the process of like getting a recording done. And then if you can find it quickly and you have the material to do a demo, get that done. And then and then have that professional recordings done, and then take the edit it yourself. And that's another big thing now is it's all editing. They want you editing yourself,
which is crazy because it had always been a separate role, but the expectation has changed.
Yeah. I think it changed with we're going to hire people from their house. And if they can do it from their house, well, let's let them do the editing too, which is a bit of a learning curve, but I don't think it's too difficult if you can figure out how to do it. Just mess around with Audacity. It's free. And I used Audacity for first like 6, 7, 8 months before I switched to Adobe.
Yeah, it's not impossible to learn, but I feel like almost like skiing. It's not impossible to learn when you get started, but
Yeah.
getting it really good,
Yeah.
there is an art to that part.
Yeah. Yeah. The two things I would, because like there's always the thing that people say is like, oh, you've got a great voice, you should do voice acting. The thing that I look for whenever I ever recommend it to someone is, how good are you at taking direction? How good is your base level of acting? Like, how much potential do you have to grow within a short period of time? And then how committed are you? Because it is not just have a good voice. You'll never, you won't land any auditions. And it's unfortunate, but directors and producers would much rather you have acting than a unique voice. The unique voice is great, but if you can't act, they don't care.
That's really interesting. What would you say is like a really good example of voice acting in a movie or video game or TV series or whatever? And what's a bad example of voice acting?
So the one I've joked among friends with recently is like hugely is a thing is Chris Pratt in Mario, because like the only compliment I was able to give the entire performance was it was not entirely distracting. That was the best thing I could say. That was the kindest thing I could say about his performance.
Good on you for being kind.
Yeah, that was the best thing I could say. It was like, it is not entirely distracting from the other performances. But then the recent surprise for me was Robert Pattinson in Boy and the Heron. And I was just what he does, he just does whatever he wants. And I love that. And he just lies his way into every audition and just does whatever he wants. And it's just amazing. Like how he does things is just amazing. But like listening, I told my wife, I was like, who do you think this is? She's like, I don't know. Willem Dafoe? Like, no, that's Robert Pattinson. It's just, because it's the level of commitment. And it's just, I think that's something we've lost a lot recently, especially in voice acting, is they're trying to hire more and more celebrities. It's like, oh, I'm just going off my name. But whereas like you get someone like Robert Pattinson, like that's not recognizable as Robert Pattinson. And that's amazing.
Yeah, I think that I think what's so curious about voice acting to me is that you get one voice that then learns how to become different characters with your voice. And like that is such a, like obviously with stage acting, you're becoming a different character, but your voice is pretty much the same all the time.
Yeah.
But then with voice acting, like you're literally becoming like a different voice, a different character. Like if you watch enough cartoons and anime and stuff, you hear some of the same people are floating around. But yeah, I was going to bring up Robert Pattinson because what a from left field performance that no one would have known that was him.
No.
And just like a great example of how voice acting is its own thing. And that just because you're a celebrity and an actor doesn't mean that you are going to be a good voice actor.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I've definitely complained about. I have a friend at Sony Animation. We always talk about like Hotel Transylvania. It's just A-list actors showing up.
Yep.
And you're like, there's your entire budget. Good luck.
Yeah.
Whereas I met one guy when I went to a film festival years ago, Jim Meskimen, who's got 320 credits to his name on IMDb. Everything from video games to additional voices and narrators to he's done George Bush, he's done the KFC commercials, he's done everything. And to me, I'm like, that's so much more talent that should be respected let the person who is a good voice actor act. This is not against Keegan-Michael Key or whoever. But when they show up and they're just themselves, I'm like, I didn't need him to be a Koopa. Like, at least Jack Black put a little something into Bowser that wasn't just Jack Black. But it's hard to watch sometimes when you're like, oh, give me a real voice actor who can do tons of different things in range.
Yeah. I think that, like, it's such an interesting thing from the producing Hollywood side. It's, first off, I needed I've been working on finding an agent, so I'm not there yet because you have to have an agent to get into Hollywood. They won't accept auditions any other way. But one of the biggest things that I've seen this move towards is from the film side, they talk about how characters sell tickets, not actors now. But it seems that they haven't gotten that message with voice acting, where they're starting to like redo all these amazing projects that people know so well. And then they're like, okay, we need a big celebrity to voice these characters. And it's like, no, we have iconic voices. There are people who can do those voices. And like, I appreciate that. I'm so bad with names, but the guy who's played Mario and every character for decades, so bad at names, but at least had a cameo in the film. And it's like, I think he knew he was retiring at that point because he's officially retired and brought on the next guy who's really good. He does the voice extremely well, very similar voice profile to start from. But the fact that like he's right there, I also understand that like having this very stereotypical Italian accent is problematic for the film in general. And like having just someone hire a New Yorker at least. Like Chris Pratt was just like he was slipping in and out of the accent the entire time. And I'm just be yourself. I could literally rant about that film for hours, but it's
the name of that actor, Charles Martinet.
Yeah.
Who just made it iconic. And to your point, there is a weird game of like, what's politically correct? What should we be doing?
Yeah.
But the worst part is a lot of the loudest, it just sounds too whatever. A lot of the loudest voices are ones who have no place saying much about it. The Scots absolutely love Groundskeeper Willie.
Yeah.
From Simpsons. Love him. That's a one that works and you're like, keep it going.
Yeah.
Now, Apu, maybe that was not that was a little just too much on the nose. We got to change that one. But I feel like there has to be a little more negotiation with some of these things of like, don't just show up as yourself. Like do a little something different in good taste, but act. Don't just read the lines.
So I'm definitely more of the opinion that like you find iconic voices. If they're a great actor and they're just doing themselves, I'm perfectly fine with that. Matthew Mercer he has a huge range, but there are a lot of characters he does that's just very much Matthew Mercer. And that I'm totally fine with because he has immense acting talent as a voice actor versus just someone coming in and just like, oh, I'm a celebrity. I'm just going to read the lines. I'm going to act. It's like it's a different type of acting. And it's especially like, it feels like I've always felt it's like you have stage acting, you have realism, you've got cartoons, but I feel like some people don't bridge that gap into the animation where it's a little bit more over the top. It's a little bit more, everything is like, because I've done some like small anime things, just where they're like, all right, now we're going to have you make exasperated sounds for 10, 20 minutes. And it's just like, and it's just like, it's the weirdest thing ever. And they're like, give me 15 takes of that. And it's just like, okay, great. This. And it's just like, they do a lot with that. Like those kind of things are some of the most bizarre, weird moments where you're having to do the sound effects of like, okay, this is a thing I'm doing. This is a decision that is being made. And
it's like when you play Smash Brothers, like all those characters it's like make a noise as if you're getting hit in the head with a Pokeball, or pretend like you've got a flower on your head.
Yep.
Or you're getting like 3 points of damage. Like I just the creativity that kind of underlies needing to just make inane noises that ultimately are really important and translate over to an audience's understanding what's happening on screen is really just like, that's a talent like that I think goes unnoticed by a lot of people.
It's also, it takes a lot because like they show you what they want usually. Like it depends on how far along the process they are. whether they're going to like map it to you, whether they're going to like, they've already done most of the work and you're like with dubbing, like you're trying to match what was being said. It's a really interesting thing to like sound realistic while they're like, all right, give me 30 takes of you screaming. And it's like, because they're like, and I think a lot of people lose that where like you need to take risks, especially like when you're already hired, even in your audition. Like if you're seeing, because I did a few auditions through TikTok because there was this company that was doing things for a while where they were hiring people from TikTok because they were trying to hire like new and upcoming people, which was amazing. And I like to wait and not get my audition in first because then I could watch some of the other people. And I'm like, you've got 30 people taking this the exact same direction. I'm going to be different. It's going to be weird, but it's going to be different. And I think that a lot of people try to play it safe. And when you're auditioning, like I do roughly 60 auditions a week. When you're doing like, when you're back to back to back to back auditions, it's one, monotonous, and two, if you're not taking the risks, you're just going to sound like everyone else and you're not going to stand out.
And I can only imagine the passion lessens each audition as you're like, here we go again. Guy in a fight again, guy in a fight the third time, guy in the fight the 20th time.
It helps when you land a role.
Yeah.
It revamps everything. And then you go back, and I also get a lot of commercials. So it's always just the switch into the commercial voice. And it's just like, I don't hate doing commercials. They pay well compared to animation. Unfortunately, does not pay as well as it should, but commercials, because of capitalism, pays pretty well. And so I can land a few small commercials and I'll be pretty fine for a while. And even though I would much rather be doing some bizarre, crazy character, but it pays for itself.
Yeah, I was going to say on commercials, I know I've met a lot of people here in LA that like live actors in the commercials that you do one happy Honda days and pays you for the next 20 years as long as they use your clip. Is that the same thing in voice acting where if your voice is used, you get residuals or something like that?
So it depends on the contract, unfortunately. There are a lot of contracts that are like one-off pay. Shouldn't be, but they are. Yeah, they're, especially once you get an agent, usually then they'll fight that for you and like, hey, actually my client wants to make sure they're getting residuals on this. I've done audiobooks that are exclusively royalties. And then usually I only do those for people I know because there's no guarantee on money there. And so the ideal would be the split where you get this up front for your work and then you take a percentage of royalties. Does that happen nowadays? No, unfortunately. And the money side gets tricky because it's a completely different world, especially when you start out where you're just working for yourself and you've got to figure all this out financially.
Yeah, it's wild. And we just saw the last year with all these strikes and union decisions and talks and face-offs. It is just not it's not a good world for creativity to always be hustle, grind, starve. And they're like, if you're the 1 to 5% that actually makes it big, cool, you have enough money to live off. If not, it's just side work, gig work until you die.
Yeah, but if you land that one thing that, like, there are actors that I'm like, they made the smartest decision. Like the guy who plays Danger for those like commercials, he's been doing it for 20 years now. Yeah. Like he still does it. And I'm like, yeah, I would do that till I die too. Like that is going to, like, if I just have to do these one shoots every like 6 months to do a new shoot and I'm going to keep getting, I'm never turning that down. And
yeah, I've heard from J.K. Simmons. He's like, the M&M's money has always helped me when the roles haven't come in, which is crazy to think of, like Oscar winner J.K. Simmons being like, thank heavens I had M&M's.
Yeah.
He's the yellow M&M?
He's the yellow M&M.
Oh my gosh, my world just turned upside down.
You'll never watch the commercials the
Oh
same.
my gosh. Okay, wow, cool.
Yeah, I feel like those people who get really lucky and land those like gigs, it's like keep that as long as you can. And I think that some people are like, I want to move on to bigger and better things. It's like, if you can do both, do not burn that bridge. And it will, because unfortunately that's where the money is, even though it's far less creative and it's much shorter. I think some commercials can be fun depending on the role.
Viva la capitalism.
Yeah.
Let's change gears a little bit and just talk about who is on your voice acting Mount Rushmore. Do you have some names or some people you're like, that's who I want to be like? Or just someone who's like, they're doing everything with the voices? I know you mentioned Matthew Mercer.
Yeah.
Who else is on that list?
It just especially like from the D&D side. Like if I could be the next Matthew Mercer, I don't want to be the next Matthew Mercer. I feel like I'm not young enough to be the next Matthew Mercer.
First Jasher Austin.
But like that, just the range of characters and improv and just he does a little bit of everything. The fact that I think more of my goals are projects. Like I definitely have more projects goals. Like they've just announced that they're going to be redoing One Piece. Like the fact that opens me up to have that opportunity to be in, like, I like that. I've been watching it since it was the 90s. I was single digits when I started watching it.
We lad.
Yeah. So like I've been in love with this show since I was a small child. And the fact that they're like, yeah, we're halfway done with this one, but we're going to also remake it with faster pacing and more stuff. I'm like, I have a chance to land a role where I could do this for life. Like if I could, there are a few cartoons and animes. Like I want to be like, I would love to land a role. Like my best friend, she is so good at names. And I just like, who's this? Kenny, SpongeBob, the voice of SpongeBob.
Steven Hillenburg, right?
No, he's the creator.
He's the creator, darn it.
Kenny, it's Tom Kenny? That might be right.
Tom Kenny, yes, thank you, Tom Kenny.
I would love to land a show where like you're the lead and like you're just get to be this character for a decade or two. And like the idea of just getting to like, I also understand the idea of getting bored in a role, but I also find like the idea of getting to just be a part of someone's childhood or the part of someone's like life where you get to have that experience of embodying this character that brings so much joy to somebody and you get to do it for a decade.
And I know at a certain point it must be a job to everybody. Yeah. Like that's a job. Yeah. But I work at Crunchyroll. Mm-hmm. I work right next to a guy who's always doing voices. And I was like, why does he sound so familiar? And these voices. And he's like, oh, sometimes I fill in for Seth MacFarlane on some Family Guy stuff. He did a voice one day and I was like, wait, what have you done? He was like, oh, Danny Phantom. I was Danny Phantom. And that was my moment of like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Saturday morning cartoons. And he's just sitting here making jokes with me. I'm like, that's Danny Phantom. Yep. And also was Beast Boy for a time.
Yep.
And then he puts on the Beast Boy voice. And I'm like, wait.
Yeah.
It is impactful. Like someone who watches a Tony Stark as Iron Man or Luke Skywalker. It really fills this picture in your brain of like, oh, that was childhood. That's not only nostalgia, but like it's the soundtrack of what I grew up watching. So that would be great.
Yeah. And I love the whole convention circuit because like I'm going to my first convention as press this year. I'm going to be going to Gen Con in Indianapolis. We're going to be hosting at least one panel as our D&D group. Hopefully more. Depends on how many we can get for the weekend. But just that first time of like, it's a very different experience being on stage. And I lost that in voice acting because I grew up in stage where it's that immediate audience reaction. And then also the immediate audience reaction, especially if you go off stage afterwards and like meet the people, it's like you lose that when you're with the internet. Like I get chat, like I'll do voice acting on Twitch. I'll do stuff on Twitch. Like I do you get the chat, but it's not the same. These are just words and faceless people. I don't know who you are. You could be a robot. I don't know.
Yeah, very different reaction, and it must be more difficult to act as well because you're not getting the reaction. You're not seeing what's working. It's just like an LOL or a like button or something.
I will say that's very helpful, especially when you actually get in a booth, or I've done roles where they have you on a Zoom call where you're recording on your own computer, but they're giving you notes as you go, which is much better. What I'll do is I've got 2 monitors. I usually have my other monitor is running Adobe, and then I usually have Zoom at top, and then I'll have whatever I'm reading on a teleprompter below that, where I can look, and out of the corner of my eye, I can see the reactions of what's working, what's not. Like I can pause, take it back, and it's a lot better, when you've got that immediate reaction versus, hey, record this for me at home, and I'll send you an email how I liked it, and it's like, great, thanks.
Thanks for that. Not that you're going to prescribe it to anybody else, but tell us a little about your setups. You're doing Audacity or Audition. What kind of mic do you have? Do you have foam padding around? What's the setup like for a voice actor?
So I built this because I like to sit when like there are a lot of people who like to stand. I don't have the room in where I currently am. I'm going to be one of the big things we're looking at when I'm moving is a place where I can actually build a physical booth. I've got 2 PVC pipes that I pop up here that fold out. And then I've got a noise canceling blanket that goes over the top of my entire setup. And then behind my setup, I built another foam board. And then I've got carpet underneath me and then foam padding on the sides of the poles going down. It's good enough for semi-professional work, and some professional work I've been okay with. Since I've gotten really into the editing thing, I know my sound floor is not good enough for professional work. I'm fully aware of this. I forget I think it was Riot, the Disney film that was filmed during the pandemic, where she filmed under her kitchen table. And it's like,
oh, wow.
Yeah. Like, it's like, you can make it work, but it doesn't have to be especially when you're first starting. Like when I first started, I was under a blanket. It was over my head. I use this is my microphone. It's a Neat it's called the Neat King B. It's a mono condenser mic hooked up to a preamp. Don't use USB microphones. You won't get jobs. You can. Most engineers can hear it. The big thing that everyone gets is like everyone starts out with a Blue Yeti. If you are going to get that is perfectly fine for podcasts. That's perfectly fine for like streaming. Do not get it if you're going to submit an audition. I had one. That was not what I started voice acting with. I used it for streaming, and I did it for some voiceover content on TikTok as well because it was easy. I had a way to plug it into my phone. It was great. But if I'm ever doing anything professional, you got to have like a good XLR microphone. And that can be anywhere between $100 up to a few $1,000. But if you can find something that fits within your vocal range, you don't need to spend a ton of money.
Do you plug that into a mixing board or just a converter?
So
how does it go there?
What I have is it's a complete. I use a Complete Audio One. It's a German company preamp that basically I have very simple on it. I've just got my gain, and then I've got a little bit of stuff I can tweak from here. Most of the stuff I tweak is in Adobe Audition before I record. I know a lot of people use the Scarlett. Oh, what's it called? It's the one that everyone uses, musicians. It's a little red preamp. I think it's called the Scarlett something.
Oh, from Focusrite, the Scarlett Solo.
Yep. Yeah, that's the one that pretty much everyone uses. It's like $100. So my whole setup was roughly, just for the mic and the preamp, I think cost $300. and I've been using it for professional work. So you don't need to spend $1,000 on like a high-end microphone. Am I eventually going to upgrade? Absolutely, I will. This is not like, I would not record, like, I'm not going to submit something to like Disney or something. Like they'd send me to a studio, but like for just home projects where you're doing like stuff, as long as it's good, it's most likely going to be passable.
That's good to know, and I feel like a lot of times people are wondering about this, if they should, even actors. Oh, should I get into voiceover? And it's either they grab the AirPods or they're grabbing a USB mic. Like I traded an old phone for this one, and I have tried other things. It is terrible for anything but just a podcast.
Yeah.
But good to know. $300 in and out the door, a little extra foam padding, make something a little more.
Yeah, try to like, if you can, ideally don't have your AC running. Try to not have outdoor people. Like, it's the worst. I've got a tiny little fan that I'm just like, between recording sessions, it immediately turns back on because like I live in Georgia. It's during the summer. It is a nightmare under the blanket, and turn the fan on. It's okay. But yeah, just as little background noise as you can possibly stand.
Yeah, you don't have to be the Beatles at Abbey Road in the 60s, but
yeah,
definitely don't add to the editing nightmare or the background noise.
Yeah, and AI is pretty good at suppressing background noise nowadays, but if the person you're auditioning for is picky, they can hear it. You can hear the difference between someone going in and like getting rid of background noise versus going from a perfectly sound floor. And I've gotten auditions where I did subtract noise, but I definitely was like, okay, now I'm working for you. I'm gonna turn off the air and I'm gonna get it as quiet as possible.
You're staying busy. You're doing good work. The podcast, your D&D podcast, is called
Dummies and Dice Rolls.
Dummies and Dice Rolls. Available everywhere?
Yeah, we stream from Twitch, and then we need to get better at doing the podcast version of it, but it's all on YouTube, and then we have like clips on TikTok and Instagram.
And I'll make sure I link that in the show notes and in our article as well. So you're going to Gen Con, you're working on more still part-time voiceover work. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? What's the dream and the goal? Working for a studio system, on a sitcom, or not a sitcom, on an animated series? What's your world?
Whatever I can do and not have to worry about finances is the ideal, unfortunately, in the kind of world we live in. But I think the ideal would be just I land some sort of show somewhere, get my name out there, and then just work from there. And I ideally am doing shows, but you're still going to do commercials.
Even J.K. Simmons does commercials. Maybe you land one of the M&Ms.
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking some time today and talking with us about voice acting, the podcast, the world of voiceover and animation, and we'll definitely keep in touch and have you back on, as whether it be roles or other things you've learned, or just to talk about animated movies and voiceovers.
Yeah, love to.
Thanks again for coming on. All right, let's talk about what we've been watching that doesn't have CGI apes in it.
Let's see. I watched Roadhouse with Jake Gyllenhaal.
I said no CGI apes.
I guess, yeah, Homo sapiens are apes, and so you're right. I was wrong.
And there is a lot of CGI in the movie. Not CGI. Yeah, it is CGI.
Janky.
You had seen it before I saw it, and you said, give it a watch, let's talk about it. It was weird. Tonally, character decisions, action, plot, the whole thing was weird.
Yeah. Okay, just as like some context, I have not seen the original Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze.
Same here.
And as far as I'm aware, this is not necessarily a remake of that movie as much as it's borrowing the name, and it's like making a movie.
Yeah.
At least as far as I'm aware.
Borrowing the IP so it's easier to get pushed through. That definitely sounds like what it is, I guess.
Yeah. I think what I said to you when I was in the middle of watching it was, this movie sounds like it was written by the first act, especially the first act, I don't know, the dialogue. It was not an actor problem because the actors in this movie I thought were really good. You got Jake Gyllenhaal, you got Jessica Williams, and you
Billy
got the guy,
Magnuson.
yeah, Billy Magnuson, and he was in the last James Bond film. Like you got these are good actors, I think.
Yeah.
But the dialogue just felt like either a teenager wrote it or artificial intelligence wrote it. Like it just was like, oh, this is what people who act like this talk like. And it just didn't feel very real. And on top of that, maybe Post Malone's acting debut. I don't know if it's actually his acting debut, but he was in the first 5 minutes of it in a fight ring. And
Post Malone was in the movie we mentioned recently, the Guy Ritchie film Wrath of Man, in a small role. Not very good in that one. And he was in Spencer Confidential with Mark Wahlberg. Again, not fantastic. He wasn't given much. He just pops up and people are like, oh, Post Malone.
I love Post Malone, but something was really janky about the choreography. And I looked in the trivia later, and that's because everyone had a digital body double with the fights.
Yeah.
So they like filmed the fights, but then they had digital body doubles for the fights so that instead of doing fake hits, they could show a fist hitting a face. And what that results is a really janky, kind of stuttering, uncanny valley choreography that was really on display in Post Malone's opening fight scene, but it was still on display throughout the movie as well.
Yeah, it was unsettling to watch. When we're talking about Roadhouse, this is one of those moments where I just can't tell from the IMDb what the real story is. Because I know how many politics are wrapped up into writing and credits and the rest of it. We have the story and the motion picture screenplay and motion picture story for Roadhouse by R. Lance Hill, an old fella who did the original Roadhouse. So somehow I'm guessing they're just giving him credit because it's based on the original. That's got to be what it is. Then you have Chuck Mondry, who's known for nothing. This is the first screenplay, and that's my guess. My guess is he's the one that did the real bulk of the writing. But then they also credit Anthony Bargozzi, who is known for writing The Nice Guys. And you just can't write you just can't write The Nice Guys from 2016 that is just hilarious and well done and beautiful tangling of all these different plot structures. You can't go from that to this. So that's where I think he came into bat cleanup and just get into a better shape to shoot. That would be my guess, but I don't know.
He was like a punch-up guy.
Because a lot of times you'll have ghost punch-up guys that are just not paid, who maybe do this most of their time. They're not writing the originals. They're just punching up everybody's and go uncredited. But if it's enough of a punch-up, or if the pay is not there, sometimes they will get a writing credit. The other part is Doug Liman directed this, who did some amazing movies. One of my favorites, Edge of Tomorrow. He's directed Jumper in 2008, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. He directed Heist. He directed The Bourne Identity, Swingers, Go, Fair Game, Edge of Tomorrow, The Wall, American Made, Chaos Walking, The Recruit. He has a lot of credits under his belt. And good movies and shows. I just wonder where it got lost because it was all over the place. And like you're saying, the janky fight scenes, Uncanny Valley is one thing, but also just bad plot and none of it was cohesive.
Yeah, no. It's funny to me that a movie like this can attract Jake Gyllenhaal, right? Like if you're Jake Gyllenhaal and you've been in some really renowned movies, I'm thinking like The Nightcrawler, right? It's such a good film.
Yeah.
What attracts you to this movie, and why do you do it?
So
Is
he
it
was
just
on
a reason to get ripped? Like, yeah.
He was on Smart Lists a month ago when this first was coming out, or right before, part of his press tour. And on Smart List, he tells the guys the original Roadhouse was a dream movie of his. If he could do anything, he'd want to redo Roadhouse. Now, I don't know if that's just his narrative for this entire thing.
Yeah.
But regardless, he told them Roadhouse was his favorite movie. Now, if you or I saw Gentlemen Broncos and we were like, oh my gosh, this is our favorite movie. If we could just remake one thing, it would be this weird movie. Maybe we'd do it no matter what, if the script was terrible or you just would hope it gets punched up. But he did train with his trainer, Jason Walsh, and was just excited to be a ex-UFC fighter. Tons of conditioning, getting the body in a crazy shape. So I guess it proves he could do it, but you're right. It attracted good actors. It just, yeah, I don't know if the paycheck was just too big to turn away. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm trying to be, I think, generous with it. Like, if you just turn off the critical part of your brain, was it a fun movie to watch? And even then, it just kept going. It was like two and a
Yeah.
half hours. And there were fun moments. I think my favorite fight scene of the entire show was the first one where he's at the Roadhouse for the first time
Yeah.
and he's dealing with these guys and he's like, "Oh, you're going to have to call an ambulance for these guys cuz I'm sorry I hurt you." And these guys are just taking swings at him and he's dodging everything. And it was probably telling that my favorite fight scene in the movie is one in where there are a lot of whiffs where you didn't have to use the digital double to create a synthetic punch because it looked more real and I bought it. That was my favorite fight scene. But was it a fun movie to watch? Maybe it was fun, but there are more fun movies I could have watched.
Yeah, here's the thing I'll say about studio and business minds. They're usually wrong, I would say, in general. Sometimes they have a big hit, but I think in general the creative minds know where to go. I think on this one, the wires are crossed. Doug Liman did The Beekeeper with Jason Statham. Weird movie, weird premise. The guy keeps bees as part of a secret organization, then becomes a whole shoot 'em up. Okay, that was supposed to go straight to streaming, and instead they did a theatrical release. And Doug Liman was pissed. He says, "This is for streaming. I don't want to have critical reviews like that."
Yeah.
But then for Roadhouse, he wanted to go to theaters, and they instead switched it and put it to streaming. MGM and Amazon say, "We're doing this because it's going to be unfairly criticized and compared to the original." Here's the reality. They watched this and went, "Nah." No, pop your popcorn at home. This is not going to go to theaters. We are not doing a full press tour. We do not want this.
Yeah.
We're not putting this out there.
Yeah.
And I think it was the right choice because you're right. It was fun at times. That first fight scene was good. There were a couple other scenes that I thought were fun. Jake Gyllenhaal, in my mind, at least for how it was written, played it like a psychopath and Nightcrawler. Like it wasn't
did,
like
yeah.
the UFC guy. He's a little clinically insane. I just think every single line that Conor McGregor delivered made me wince. And
I know.
you could do that for punching, but not for talking. And every stupid one-liner, "I got a tip for you. Don't let no one get this close." Headbutts a guy. "Looky here, our own little octagon." And he's on an inflatable boat. And I was like, what? How is this even an octagon?
Jake
Broke your
Gyllenhaal's
leg.
character is like, he's like, "What? Learn your shapes." And I'm like, what kind of a response is that? Like,
Bad
it's
quips.
just not great. Yeah.
He's making Irish jokes, and he just does his little monkey walk. Speaking of Monkey Boy, his arms flapping around everywhere he goes. And it just was the worst one-liners and his big fake veneers showing off to everybody. It just was,
Yeah.
it was hard. It was hard to watch.
It was hard to watch.
Roadhouse.
Yeah.
Put it on the background, but don't put too many brain cells towards it.
Yeah. No, don't.
Let's talk about one more that's like that before we go to a better step.
Yeah.
We're going to go two bad, one good, one best.
Cool.
Unfrosted. Jerry Seinfeld. I love the Seinfeld show. I
Yeah.
enjoy his old stand-up, his new, his old manish, whatever. I love comedians in cars getting coffee, just like quips and getting to know people. Unfrosted is terrible.
I have not actually seen a trailer for it, but just seeing the liner of like, this is what this is about, I'm just like, I don't think I need to spend my time with this.
So, in press junkets and interviews, Jerry Seinfeld is claiming, and he might be right. He's claiming that he did not get Kellogg's permission to do the story at all. He says, "I want this to be the opposite of Barbie. I'm not going to Mattel. I'm not going to Kellogg. I wrote and started the movie without Kellogg's knowledge." I find that hard to believe, but in watching the movie, it's just a 2 hour long fictional narrative about the creation of Pop-Tarts, parroting every movie under the sun with every famous comedian, and it is so god awful. I just don't know how Netflix paid him for this.
Yeah, like how does that happen? He's Jerry Seinfeld. Like how does it happen? Make it make sense to me.
So my friend and I have talked about this a little bit. When certain people get too big to be told no, it just becomes too monstrous. where they just can never get knocked down. Jennifer Lopez is a great example of this. That music video / movie she did for Prime, horrendous. Should never have happened. But no one could tell her no because she's Jennifer Lopez. No one can tell Jerry Seinfeld no. I'm like, this has some of the youngest, best comedians. Someone should have been like, Jerry, this hurts me to read. We cannot do it this way. But either way, it's bad. You have a fake cast of characters doing tastes, everything from Jack LaLanne to Mr. Schwinn, a Schwinn bicycle, to the guy that invented sea monkeys, who was actually a Nazi, and they point that out inside the movie. There's just like so many. There's a parody of January 6th at the Kellogg's factory with Hugh Grant as Tony the Tiger leading the raid into the Kellogg's building as like the shaman. It's just so bad. It's really terrible. So this is one that I would say skip for the most part, unless you've just taken 3 or 4 gummies and you're ready to buckle up. Because in no other way does this make sense or cause satisfaction while watching. So yeah, Unfrosted. We can it'll get buried in the site next month.
Good. Probably for the best.
Yeah. Let's talk about a good one.
Fall Guy. As a blonde white man, Ryan Gosling is the epitome of blonde white man. Like,
yes.
He's who I want to be. He's who I just want to be him. What a great film. So this was David Leitch, I think, and he did Deadpool 2. He did Bullet Train. Just great films. I think he started as a stunt coordinator or stunt producer or whatever.
He's Brad Pitt's stuntman.
Yeah. And so that's why these movies do stunts so well, is because he made the jump from being a stunt coordinator and being a stunt performer to being a director, which makes it he's the perfect director to direct a movie about stunt people.
He is. I will say it's at least in my eyes, a blessing and a curse, because at some moments you're like, oh, he wrote this just for the stunt, not for plot, which is fine.
Yeah.
They broke the world record for car flips in the movie.
That was pretty cool.
Which was pretty cool.
And then they pointed it out in the movie.
Yeah. A little self-aware, but we'll go with it. So this has not been doing amazing at the box office compared to what they want it to be. So opening weekend was 27.7 million. And right now, worldwide, we're at 103 million, but they really care about the domestic. Domestic's at 49.7. So it'll get to 50 quickly, and then maybe it nets out at 100. Who knows? Maybe less.
Right.
I just know they really were pushing for it to be bigger. And at least in LA, they were pulling out all the stops. Every premiere or event, they're having stunt guys blown through the backs of walls and dropping down from the sky. And Ryan Gosling's at Universal Studios doing an event with other stunt guys. They really want this to be huge. And for some reason, it's just not breaking through.
Yeah.
When you saw it, was it a full theater? Were you one of 10? Like, how was it in Utah?
Okay. I saw it at 11:45 in the morning. So it was not a full theater. But it was a more full theater than I've had at 11:45 in the morning.
Okay.
So there were a number of people in the theater who were there. But yeah, no, that's more of a me problem because I haven't actually seen a movie in the evening in a really long time.
Fun employed, doing well. All right.
Yeah,
all right.
Exactly. Yeah, but that actually surprises me that it's not doing as well, because I feel like I don't know how much of the budget they put into marketing, but it was huge. Like I've heard about this movie for months, and I've seen so many ads for this thing.
Expectation is usually your production budget will be nearly doubled for marketing. So you'll spend almost the same. So the thing is, with a production budget of 125 to 140 million, that's what they're saying. Which sometimes those fudge numbers, who knows? But even if we just say with marketing combined, we're at 2 or 210, that's a heroic budget for something that has not opened so well. And I don't know why people aren't seeing it, other than they just don't care as much about Ryan Gosling. I don't know.
I don't know how that could possibly be, because how could you not like Ryan Gosling?
And the other part is, I saw the pre-screen for this 8 months ago.
You did?
I did, yeah, and I had to keep it under wraps. I cannot talk about this movie until it comes out. I saw this 8 months ago, and they have completely revamped the movie. The whole beginning, the voiceover, all these parts that are in it now were not there the first time. When I left the theater the first time, I said it was a 2.5 star, maybe 3 star
Oh
movie out of
wow.
five. I just thought it was very cheesy and it was all over the place. The drug scene was way longer in the first version. They just drew some things out a lot longer. I am happy with how they changed it. I still
Yeah.
think for me it's like a 3.5 to 4, but I know I feel tired of bullet train Deadpool humor at times. So I know it's a
Yeah.
personal thing, but I am in confusion like you and others of why aren't more people seeing it? Like this should be what they want. Explosions, stunt guy, fun, rom-com. It should be there.
Yeah. I think what was funny was this movie's only 2 hours and 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Like in terms of big budget movies, like that is on the lower end in my mind, but it felt long. Even though to me the pacing felt totally fine. There was no point when I was watching where I was like Killers of the Flower Moon, you're like, oh my gosh, whoa, how much time has gone by? We've still got an hour left. I wasn't watching the clock during this movie, but it somehow still felt long for being only 2 hours.
Yeah.
And when we were about wrapping up Act Two, when he's like trying to go to karaoke, I was like, this is where I feel like the movie should end. This is where I would expect the movie to end. But no, there's still like another 30, 40 minutes left. And it was funny that the movie was really self-aware, which I actually really like in movies. Surprise, my favorite TV shows like Community or just these other shows that they're just very self-aware. I really like that. And so there were moments in the show where in the first act, in the first moments, with Emily Blunt being the director on this thing, the writer is coming up to her and saying, we're trying to break Act 3. Here's an idea. Should the person in Act 3 reference the fact that they're struggling with Act 3 in the movie? And she's like, that's a good idea. Let's think about that. And I was like, I wonder if that was them telling me that they're struggling with Act 3 and that Act 3 is going to be a little wild.
And they did it.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, there were some good moments. I think Emily Blunt felt a little underused for the caliber of star, I guess she was. But the other part was I don't know if she was the one that should have been in this role. I think if we're saying young, quippy, funny director with a suave but stupid Ryan Gosling, not stupid, just suave but like bumbling stuntman.
Himbo, yeah.
It could have been somebody else in my mind. Like you put Issa Rae in there, maybe like it fits better. You put, I don't know, just someone with a little better comedic timing, and not even her fault. I just think again, maybe it was miscast. And I also think that Hannah Waddingham was fantastic. She's fresh off of Ted Lasso. She's doing great. Her character, at least to me, even in the pre-screen, it was like, oh, she's the bad woman. Okay, we got that part.
Yeah.
But then I don't know if she fully sells. I don't know. It felt a little messy. I thought the boat jump was fun but messy. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, like the choreography for that one I love a good setup and delivery. Like they did a really good job of setting that one up where Ryan Gosling's character is wearing this jacket the entire time, the Miami Vice stunt crew.
Yeah.
And he makes some passing reference to it of being like, oh, I had to jump a boat through a hoop of fire. I did it so many times I could do it with my hands tied behind my back.
Yeah.
And it's so nonchalant. So I was just like, oh, character development. And then it's like, oh no, he's going to have to do that later on in the movie. Like that is so satisfying to watch.
Yeah. Check off rope.
Yeah, exactly. But then as soon as it's done and you look, there's a shot that is like pulled back a little bit and you see the landscape of the harbor that he's boating in.
Yeah.
You're like, but why did he need to do that?
Yeah.
Why did that happen? Other than just for the sake of it happening.
I had a friend call it a fridge movie, which I had never heard before. Have you heard that term before?
I have heard that, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And he explained it for the listeners who don't know. It's by the time you get home from the theater and you open your fridge, the whole plot and logic breaks down and no longer makes sense. And I think that was a little bit of this movie, not to say it wasn't fun. And I think it was a fun time. It deserved to be in theaters. I think more people should see it. I think it's fun to have more original ideas. The gigantic budget does scare me because I'd rather have 5 movies at 40 million apiece, then one bloated movie at 145 to 180. Then when it doesn't make it, everyone's like, failure. Can't trust these movies. No, just make it a little cheaper and like, don't cast Emily Blunt. Cast somebody else. Cast some new actress. Cast somebody, whatever.
Yeah, I will say, I was sitting there like thinking, this is one of the benefits of how like Marvel films have just taken a back seat in our cultural moment right now, is that we get to, it's creating space for original content, for original movies. Even though technically, I guess this is not an original movie, that because it was based on a TV show that was based on a book or something.
It has
Anyways,
so little to do with the original IP.
It's basically an original content. But I'm like, how lucky are we to be getting some like genuinely good time movies that have nothing to do with Marvel or superheroes right now?
Yeah, it's a little taking us back to 2000s, which is nice.
Yeah, like even if it had some weaknesses and could have made some casting changes or pacing changes, like it still was a good movie. Like I walked out of there happy that I saw it, and I'd see it again.
Yeah. And I hope, I don't know if people are just waiting for it to hit streaming because they just don't know anything about it, but I don't understand how it's possible with all the ads out there. I don't know about you. I've gone back to ad-supported tiers on a bunch of my streamers because I just don't want to pay the extra money. I'm seeing ads for things. There's no way you don't see ads for this. I don't know. Either way, Fall Guy, a fun time, good movie. See it in theaters. Let's talk about the last movie. What else have you watched at home?
Yeah, I watched we watched Civil War. That was Alex Garland, and so that made me want to go back and watch his. I want to say it was his first movie that he did. It was one of A24's first darlings that they had, Ex Machina, with Oscar Isaac, Domhnall Gleeson, and Alicia Vikander.
What a great cast, by the way.
Truly, so good.
Yeah, let me check. Okay, so he has been writing longer.
Yeah.
But that was the first movie he directed. You're right, 2014.
I love this movie, not only because it was one of the first R-rated movies I ever went to go see in the theaters.
Wow.
Because a sheltered Mormon kid from Utah.
Yeah.
But I wrote, this was the subject of like my thesis when I was graduating from college. I spent probably 2 months with this movie thinking about artificial intelligence and consciousness, and in my postmodern theology class, and it was a wild ride. And so I've spent a lot of time with this movie thinking about the metaphors, thinking about the shots, thinking about the dialogue, thinking about just like all what it means.
Yeah.
And just like, it's such a simple movie with a really small cast.
Yeah.
And it's just enough that it's such a, and especially in this cultural moment where artificial intelligence is such a big deal right now, it feels really prescient and it feels really chilling.
Yeah, it's interesting because he had written a handful of movies before directing this movie, including and video games, which I had not realized. He wrote a handful of video games, Devil May Cry, Enslaved, a couple others, but he wrote some other kind of creepy movies that went under the radar. 2007, he wrote a film, Sunshine, directed by Danny Boyle and starring Cillian Murphy and Rose Byrne and Chris Evans. So it's not like he was a stranger to writing kind of creepy or dark movies. He wrote 28 Days Later. Again, famous movie. But watching Ex Machina, you realize, oh, this is writing and directing and having your whole vision the way you want it. And it just blew me away that from the get-go, it's a well-reviewed Oscar discussion, if not darling, whatever you want to call it. But it was a statement piece of, oh, this guy has something to say, and it's dark, and it's scary, and it's artistic. Whatever comes next, we're going to watch. The sad part was it was Annihilation, which was just too scary for some.
Yeah.
But I think we are just attuned to, he put himself on that level close to Denis Villeneuve or one of the other directors like that in 2014, Inarritu, people who just came on and explode on the scene. Damien Chazelle of, I have something to say, and here's how I'm going to say it. It's my way. Okay, we're buckled in.
Yeah. For people who haven't seen this movie, it's about a Turing test, and a Turing test is this hypothetical test posited by Alan Turing, who was during World War II. He was a scientist slash engineer who helped do a lot of code breaking. A really tragic movie. You want to watch his Imitation Game with Benedict Cumberbatch. It was a very sad movie about Alan Turing. But he was one of the pioneers of computing and coding and that kind of stuff. And so he posited the idea that like, oh, we're going to at some point create artificial intelligence. And the way that you prove that you've succeeded in creating artificial intelligence is by having a human interact unknowingly with an artificial intelligence. And if they can't tell the difference, if they think that they're interacting with another human, then you've passed the Turing test and you've successfully created artificial intelligence. And the movie takes it one more step further, which I think is really, especially considering the moment that we're in, really wise. Because Oscar Isaac's character in the middle of the movie is like, no, the Turing test, if I hid the fact that Ava, the robot, was a robot from you, you would just think that she was a human. Like we're to the point where, you know, the language model is good enough that you wouldn't doubt her humanity just by interacting with her. He's like, the real test though is if I show you that she's a robot and you still think that she's conscious. That's the real Turing test. And now we live in a world where you're interacting with ChatGPT or Gemini. And especially, I don't know if you've seen today, OpenAI is announcing like a version of ChatGPT that is multimodal. So it can do text, you can talk to it, you can show it can look through your camera, and it will verbally talk back with you in a very naturalistic human sounding voice. It's very much like the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix. And I think that's the moment we're living in right now is I'm going to show you that this thing is a robot. And if you still think that it's conscious, we have passed the Turing test. And it's very creepy. The movie is very creepy because the whole thing about having an artificial intelligence is that it's intelligence that is you can't control it. Yeah. It's outside of you. It's wild. Even if you think you understand it and think you know it, it might have motives and motivations that you can't predict. And that's the whole point of it being conscious. And it's just close enough to reality right now that it's a chilling movie to rewatch, even though it was made like 10 years ago.
You know what's funny? After this movie, I remember discussing it in college. Maybe it was a history class. Discussing, and I want to say it was 2016, 17. I'll have to look again. There was a demonstration in which they had two AIs, and then the AIs start talking to each other and create a new language to discuss so that we can figure out what they're saying and then shut them down. It's funny that, like, I'll just say it. I've had family members just bring it up like they've just now heard of it. Like, can you believe what AI can do? And it's like, that's 10 years old. They were able to do that forever ago. I do know that there were some published reports from the DoD and from the armed forces stating when they have put AI in charge of anything military and like testing, the AI continually just goes to nukes. It just becomes war games. Oh. So I know there's some gaps here, but also I think right now there's this game of AI is going to take our jobs, AI this, AI that. AI is already in all of it, right? Like it's just becoming a little more conscious. And I think watching this movie is a good pairing with Her to think about AI as human and AI as a relationship when it comes to human and AI of how would we interact with it? What would that mean? Could we tell the difference? And are we not just dumb enough, but are we open enough to having a relationship with something we would accept a AI or a robot as our counterpart? And I think it's the chilling version as compared to Her, but it is true of we can't always tell the difference, and maybe we don't want to. Maybe we don't care enough to shut it all the way down, and there's no outside force that would make us really batten down the hatches and say, no, ethics say we don't do this.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would highly recommend people watch Ex Machina just to like get a touch, just get a different view on the moment that we're currently in. It's great acting all around. people love Oscar Isaac right now, but when you watch this, you're like, oh, you're an asshole. And he plays this dude bro tech billionaire genius really well. And in some moments you really like him, and in some moments you're like, oh, you're everything that's wrong with the world.
Yep. He does a great job. Alicia Vikander is just fantastic.
So good.
And while we're at it, Domhnall Gleeson hasn't had a ton of huge roles where he's the leading man. I love About Time.
Yeah, About Time.
He was fine in Star Wars for whatever he was given, but in this movie, he really plays his part well.
He really does. The awkward, bookish nerd guy who's just socially inept. He does a really good job at portraying that, because when you're watching it, you feel awkward and uncomfortable because he is so awkward and uncomfortable.
Looking at what Alex Garland has directed, Alex Garland really just seems to like really scary campouts. Because we've got Ex Machina, Retreat at this bad guy's cabin. You've got Annihilation, a Girl Scout camping trip with an alien who is just horrifying. You have Devs, which is a place of work out in the woods and just a lot of nature being twisted by humans. And you have Men. What else do you have to say? And then Civil War, again.
A road trip, yeah.
A scary road trip movie. I'm just hoping his next one's by a lake and features a canoe at least and a campfire scene. And we will have the Alex Garland Camping Trip from Hell series.
That's funny. And that does it for today. Thanks again for listening, everyone. We'll be back next week with another episode from Kevin's Flows series. And until then, watch good TV and movies.